Russia is the nation that I'm talking about. The Vladimir Putin administration is rekindling their relationship with some of the coup-hit nations in the Sahel and West Africa after France said that some of its last troops have left Niger. The Kremlin reopened its embassy in Burkina Faso nearly 32 years after the West African nation fell out with former colonial ruler France. Moscow closed its embassy in 1992. Here's a report from Ouagadougou.
A ceremony here and goodbyes on the other end. It was an end of an era for the French troops in Niamey, Niger, who were on their way out of the coup-hit Sahel nation. It was the third time in less than 18 months that French troops were sent packing from a Sahel nation after fellow former colonies Mali and Burkina Faso following military takeovers. France announced it would pull out its roughly 1,500 soldiers and pilots from Niger after the former French colonies' new ruling generals demanded they depart following a coup on July 26th. On the streets of Niamey, Nigerians celebrated the exit of French troops. The ceremonial pull-out event was attended by the Prime Ministers of Niger, Burkina Faso and Mali. And as the departure of France culminated in Niger, Burkina Faso was shaking hands with a new ally, Russia. Kremlin reopened its embassy in Burkina Faso after it was shut over 30 years ago, officials have said. Burkina Faso was a close ally of former colonial power France, but has pivoted towards Russia after the military seized power in a coup in 2022. The junta has expelled French diplomats and has shut France's military base in the country. At the same time, it is strengthening military and diplomatic ties with Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced plans to reopen the embassy at the Russia-Africa summit in St. Petersburg in July. The embassy was closed in 1992 when Moscow reduced its involvement in Africa after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Alexei Saltykov, Russian ambassador to Ivory Coast, is the new interim ambassador to Burkina Faso.
Je demeure convaincu que la proximité.
I remain convinced that the proximity from every point of view between the two states generated by this reopening will make it possible to offer more opportunities to the various economic and political players in the two states. It will be a catalyst for developing the economic potential of both countries and for forging fruitful partnerships.
Des potentialités économiques des deux pays. Et la Russie est prête.
Russia is ready to provide possible assistance to Burkina Faso and to build equal and mutually beneficial relations over the long term.
Bénéfique à long terme.
Overall, Russia's military presence in Africa focused on strengthening both the official and unofficial channels of defense security cooperation with different African states. It has proved to be a cost-effective way for Kremlin to gain considerable political and economic leverage in the continent that even the 2022 war in Ukraine has been unable to undermine. In 2023, Russia-Africa Summit participants agreed to establish a new permanent Russian-African security mechanism aimed at combating terrorism and extremism in the continent. However, some negative trends were also observed. For example, Algeria and Egypt, that have long been listed among Russia's top 5 arms purchasers globally, slowly started to reduce defense ties with the Kremlin in 2022. Yet, considering the high reliance of both countries on Russian origin arms, they will most likely maintain defense cooperation with Moscow in the near term. Despite the Russian Empire not being a prominent player in the 19th century scramble for Africa, the sweeping colonization of the continent by European powers forced it to pursue various goals there. This included starting with seeking trade access to Indian Ocean ports and spreading the influence of the Russian Orthodox Church. That involvement grew during the Cold War as the Soviet Union sought to pull newly independent African countries into its orbit. Soviet foreign policy focused on building relationships with sympathetic socialist or non-aligned countries across Africa, as well as supporting local communist political parties and military insurgencies. The latter included sending weapons, advisors, and other aid to allies in the civil war-ridden Angola and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Moscow also formed a close relationship with South Africa's anti-apartheid African National Congress, the country's ruling party since 1994, a relationship that continues till today. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.